Hello and welcome to the DSP Leaders Summit on Edgeonomics. I'm Guy Daniels, Director of Content at TelecomTV, and coming up now is our Challenges and Opportunities Roundtable, where we'll be discussing the partnership scenarios for edge hosting for 5G. Now, could 5G hosting justify the economics of edge compute investments for operators, or is a better strategy to partner with the public cloud providers and utilise their hyperscale technologies, offering physical location access in return? Well, let's find out what our guests think, and I'm delighted to introduce Neil McRae, Managing Director, Architecture and Technology Strategy and Chief Architect for BT, Yves Bellego, Director of Network Strategy for Orange, Francesca Serravalle, Emerging Technology Director at Colt Technology Services, and Francis Haysom, Principal Analyst with Appledore Research. Well, hello everyone, good to see you all again. Thank you so much for taking part in this roundtable. Now, as usual, we asked our viewers what they regarded as the main issues around edge and partnerships and ecosystems. And from the feedback, we created a series of questions. First one is a bit of an establisher question, so let's have a look at this one. Have network operators finalised their edge computing investment plans, or are they still in flux? And to what extent will telcos invest CapEx funds into their own compute and storage platforms? Who'd like to tackle this one? Neil, perhaps I could come to you first on this one.
Yeah, sure. Look, I think anyone who thinks they're finalised probably are for this quarter. I think there's enough variability in this. This is a new technology space. It's a new business model space. It's a new use case space. So I think we're going to be invested in this for some time. As I've said before, Guy, edge for me is crucially important because it allows us to go beyond the infrastructure, offer solutions that leverage the network, leverage 5G, leverage fiber, and really be able to, give customers a much more powerful solution from telecommunication companies, probably in partnership with others.
Thanks, Neil. Anybody else like to comment on this one and look at whether, Francesca?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, for us, it's always a process which is ongoing. We have launched an RFP for NEVI a few years ago. We have selected the supplier for a turnkey solution. We have roll out the solution in key location. And what we are doing now is really redefining the business strategy beyond distributed telco cloud. We are looking at different hosting business model. For example, we could host a security stack to enable distributed security, and we can host a cloud stack to enable distributed cloud, or 5G cloud native function to enable verticalized solution. So as we validate the market opportunity, we are really planning to scale the deployment of our edge, network edge, and customer edge globally.
Thank you. And Yves, are we looking at multiple models here? Is the investment into a telco's own compute and storage just one of several possible models?
Yes, maybe two comments on what you mentioned. Investing directly, is it the only model? Well, that's a bit of that's in all domains of the network. In fact, today we not only look the case where we just invest by ourselves. Having partnership is becoming the standard. This is all what has been done in the past years in the industry with the towercos. We also do it, by the way, also on the fixed side, not only on the mobile, with the co-investment on the fixed. So that is just the normal business now to discuss with partners and to envisage that we do not just use it the old way where we buy equipments, we deploy them, and that's it. So that's just normal business. Coming maybe to the, do we have clear plans on edge, on 5G for edge now, or edge for 5G? In fact, we see that there is some relation between edge and the Open RAN. So, and none of these projects are fully clear today. So there are still a lot of things to develop. They will progress jointly, and a lot of things are still to be built. So nothing is frozen today.
And Francis, do you have any thoughts on this particular issue?
Yes, I think there's a degree of yes and no in terms of the plans. I think there is very clearly an edge business plan for supporting 5G, supporting things ultimately, certainly things like the core networks, and in the future virtual RAN and even Open RAN in that point of view. But that is largely supporting what the telco does today. It's about the network. I think you've also got very clear plans in terms of things like CDN, which is the obvious use case for edge networks today. But I think beyond that, there is a degree of we really don't know where the use cases will come from. And in some senses, a lot of it is to do with actually generating a large number of use cases that we don't even know about currently. So to some extent, the ability to create business plans currently is down to a level of are telcos prepared to take the capital risk and invest ahead of the curve, or are they going to wait for the opportunities to come down the line? So I think there's a balancing act. There's certainly plans for what I would term is telco central, but beyond that one, there's a lot of challenges of risk versus what the potential opportunity for. And I think we need to look at edge very much like the public cloud. When Amazon set out, they very much didn't believe that they would own all the applications that they did. But they did set out with a view that they wanted to combine their assets and get the benefits of public cloud, you running their systems and allowing you to run your systems on their infrastructure. And I think that's the opportunity for telco here, is to think about how do I leverage my known investment in telco edge infrastructure, and how do I allow that to be the platform to grow into things I don't quite know what the answer will be yet.
Sure. Yeah. Exactly, Francis. I think very few do know what the future exactly holds. We're planning for a few eventualities here. Well, let's move on. Unless anybody's got any more comments, let's move on from the economics question to more of a business case question here. Are we seeing a new class of service provider emerging, a neutral host, perhaps edge computing service provider? And if so, how might this affect ongoing partnership scenarios? Anybody want to talk about the emergence of neutral host edge providers?
Yeah, Guy, I think clearly, neutral host as more and more demands for connectivity are where we can't build 5 networks in a shopping centre or on the railways or in the underground. There's clearly a role for neutral host providers. In fact, in BT, we offer this service today. We're using Telco Cloud to deliver it, and absolutely, I think this is a mode of connectivity or infrastructure build that's probably going to become a little bit more common. I think what isn't clear are the business models around it and where the value really is. I think that kind of sways from one extreme to the other. But let's be realistic. You add a neutral host. For the most part, if I connect to it, it costs me a lot of money, and I'm not usually able to monetize it because it just becomes part of the existing service. So I think that's going to constrain, the return on investments in that, much in the same way we have to manage the investment in the mobile network as a whole. But clearly, there are scale opportunities if we're sensible about it. And we follow the customers. I think we'll see more neutral hosts for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. Thank you, Neil. And Francis?
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things about neutral hosts is in reality, if we talk about edge as being something that's being used by lots of people, effectively a neutral, whoever is delivering it is delivering a neutral host capability, something that could run a telco load, something that could run a third-party application that would appeal to application developer communities. So I think the neutral host is in effect the opportunity for everybody, not those that just necessarily call themselves neutral hosts at this stage. I think the important success factor here is actually the fundamentals of public cloud. Edge follows exactly the same metrics, which is basically, can you get kit out there at the lowest cost? Can you get as much multi-tenancy on that equipment that you're maximizing its usage? And can you lower the operational cost, both in terms of people and managing that equipment, and in terms of the power and the cost of the equipment at the site? Those that get that model correct will be those that win in the environment. It will be about, is it fundamentally, for something like an enterprise or a consumer, is it cheaper for me to build it myself in my own site, or is it cheaper for me or more efficient for me to run it in an edge host? And that will be down to these multi-tenancies, that effectively neutral host opportunity. And that's an opportunity for all, including the telcos.
Yeah, thanks, Francis. Some tricky economics there. Yeah, Francesca?
Yeah, no, I agree. The trend that we are seeing is that, infrastructure providers are moving from centralized location to more distributed location, and they are building up an ecosystem around those key locations, bringing in cloud providers, content providers, and connectivity providers as well. So for us, infrastructure providers are a very key component of the value chain for the digital services. And this is why we have partnered with Equinix, because we really want to give access to give our customer access to the digital ecosystem and in the marketplace that together we interconnect.
I think in the consumer space, neutral host is probably more of a defensive play. If you're not part of a neutral host, then do your customers move to another operator? I think that's one of the big questions, because that in itself will derive some value. If I think of them, telecommunications operators were investing big in 5G. If neutral host company comes along and says, hey, connect our neutral host, it'll cost you, millions of pounds and you get this coverage. If that fits into our model, great. If it doesn't, I think there's some challenges to figure out how we make them work. And if there's a lot of them, the complexity of it will probably kill it. And I think, this is why, some level of pragmatism about the marketplace we are in, the return we're able to generate, and the investment required. And I think if neutral host organizations, and we certainly think of this as a neutral host provider, if you're not thinking about those things, you're going to build a white elephant, because no one will be able to afford to connect to it. That's where I think enterprises and more, stadium, train stations, big locations where there's clearly value are going to be probably the place where neutral host rules the most, if you like.
And Yves?
Yes, and if I see, in fact, on neutral hosting, two trends that are completely, in fact, or quite different. The one mentioned by Francesca and Francis, coming more up, down, and typically what's happening on the cloud. And we have the same on the CDNs, on the content delivery networks, where in fact things are progressively coming closer to customers. And that one, in my sense, is totally different from what we see coming from the towercos. In fact, the people owning some assets, lands, towers, or as Neil mentioned, in the railway stations, in the big stadiums, they have some assets. And for me, that has a totally separate business case, totally separate arguments, and our reaction will be we will have a different treatment. And on one side, if we look at the towercos, this is really coming from the, as Neil mentioned, from the coverage question. What is the cost to access customers and to provide the quality of service to the customers? That is much more local to the more long-term trend of things moving from centralized locations to more closer to the customers. So, and we will need to have totally different approaches on those two cases.
Great, thanks everyone for those contributions. Let's move on to our next question. This whole question of cost is permeating right through this actual round table, because this question looks at the host it yourself versus outsourced to the public cloud debate. Now, we know hyperscalers charge a lot of money for edge services. Enterprise on-prem solutions can be hugely expensive. So if telcos host their edge services and CNFs, etc., on the hyperscalers platforms, will the costs actually outweigh the benefits? Again, it's a cost-benefit economic argument, I guess, we have to look at with the edge. But it does seem that that cost is central to the edge topic. Neil.
Yeah, I mean, look, the public cloud is so expensive; it's eye-watering. And don't get me wrong, they've got some amazing, absolutely amazing innovations there. But for us as operators, the price dimension that they operate at, and the whole business model, I would argue that in the future just doesn't make sense for operators unless they change it radically. So when I look at the edge opportunity, and of course we're talking to many of the hyperscalers, we're looking at an entirely different business model that some of the hyperscalers look at and kind of think, wow, is that really how it's going to be? And I think they're starting to learn more about the telecommunications market and the dynamics and the parameters that make up our business. I think a lot of the hyperscalers saw, telco as a rich asset to go after. I think in reality, what they found is we're in one of the most difficult business sectors there is. On the pure economic side, it's difficult. But then I look at where my customers are. I've got customers in all the hyperscalers. I've got customers on-prem, and I need to be able to service all of them. So there's more than one edge in that respect, and the economics and the value for customers is going to make us think very hard about the best way to approach working with these hyperscalers, and ultimately I think it's got to be through partnership, and I think it's got to be through a lens of understanding each parts of the value chain and the business that makes what a hyperscaler is and makes what a telecommunications operator is. And I think if we do it that way, we may get somewhere. If it's just a supply of space and power, I think the edge is going to be very challenged because that on its own just isn't worth it for telecommunications companies to do.
Sure, thank you, Neil. Francis.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question to just sort of dig into the statement. This is all very, very expensive. I think we can turn the question around, which is to say the hyperscalers obviously see a value in being at the edge and deploying edge solutions, and their customers are seeing benefits in being able to buy that. And I think one of the challenges here is, are we necessarily comparing apples with apples? When you're buying that hyperscale solution, you're buying not just simply the capital investment in that, but you're buying a whole operational environment. You're building a whole load of automation that is associated with that, which often within our whether it's within the enterprise or whether it's in the telco, will be bound up in non-capex costs, the operational costs. So I think it's important that we make sure we're comparing apples with apples here. I'm not going to say for one moment that they're not eye-watering and be expensive, but they certainly wouldn't be putting those costs out if they didn't see customers that saw value in the opportunity to remove their internal IT operational costs from having to manage this edge capability, and in terms of people wishing to buy it. So I think we need to make sure that we're actually comparing like with like here, and we're doing a true comparison between the two.
Thank you, Francis. Any more comments on this question, Yves?
Yes, yeah. If I may, and in fact, you mentioned that why should we move if that is costly? Yes, and that's not the only, in fact, requirement we have. We have very strong requirements, not only on cost, but also on resilience, for example. And do not underestimate the complexity of the solutions we use, or all the energy that has been put by operators, by BT, Colt, Orange, and the others, and also by our current suppliers. So in fact, we move only when we have benefits compared to the current solutions. And the current solutions, they are already pretty very good solutions, especially when we talk about managing the volume of data of customers that we have on our networks. So we just need solutions that provide better performance. And that would drive any move on that. So, and that's why there is a lot of work that is needed so that any cloudified solution, whether it is on hyperscaler solutions or other solutions, they provide performance that are better than the current performance we have on our networks.
Thank you, Yves. And Francesca, the benefits are obviously very, very attractive, but they do come at a cost.
Yeah, I think for us, our strategy is to position our edge portfolio, both customer edge and network edge, and then develop synergy with hyperscaler in other area. So for example, we can certify our edge portfolio with their Kubernetes platform to enable orchestration of workload, which is containerized, whether it's network function, application, or data. Then we think we are also planning to use our edge network, both customer edge and network edge, to host cloud stack to enable distributed cloud so that our customer can access cloud services at the edge. And then we're also exploring further synergy to really leverage their application marketplace of the hyperscaler to bring to the market a verticalized solution. So I think, there are different areas of synergy beyond the infrastructure level and the edge that can be built up with the hyperscaler, and this is what we are doing.
Great, thank you everybody for those comments. Our next partnership question moves on to automation, and the question is, will the capabilities and scale of hyperscalers, especially in areas such as data processing, AI and databases, ultimately make them the only viable option for service providers' automation needs? And if that's the case, are there dangers of locking in here? Anybody like to? Francesca?
Well, to take that to start, yeah. So, I think the way I see that, based on the synergy initiative that we had so far with the hyperscaler, is that the cloud platform, their AI platform and analytics services are mainly be used to automate the operational layer of enterprise that are going through a digital transformation process. But when it comes to our network and our own process, we really need very specialized platform and AI platform. So for example, for us, to automate the FCAPs, we're using a certain vendors for doing self-healing and ingest FM data, or for enabling self-optimization, we're using another platform, AI platform. And probably for AI-driven security, we're going to use another platform as well. So I don't see this risk of using the cloud service provider for automating our process and the network. But I see more synergy to bring together some verticalized solution where our network is used to really feed the raw data from the enterprise, from the 5G private networks into the AI platform from the cloud service provider to really extract intelligence and actionable insight to enable those data-driven operational and business activity of enterprise.
Thank you, Francesca. And Yves, did you want to comment on the automation question?
Yes, basically, well, same view as Francesca. There are so many different loops of automation with different needs, different volumes of data, different timing, real time or less real time. So there is a lot of different solutions. Some will be based on hyperscaler solutions and frameworks, especially on AI, and some others will require much more dedicated solutions, as we already have today on the mobile network with the self-organizing network solution. That one is definitely a dedicated solution that requires its own infrastructure. And that's just normal that we will have different level of solutions, as Francesca mentioned, yes.
Thank you, Yves. And Francis?
Yeah, I think I'll just turn, again, I'm doing this a little bit too much, probably turning the question around. I think the question is kind of pitched as an all or nothing question, which is we either get everything or we don't get everything. And I think the whole point about edge is there needs to be both there's co-opetition, there needs to be partnership in this thing. There will be things that the hyperscalers bring to the equation that will just simply, the scale of it will be needed, but there'll be a whole lot of other things that they don't necessarily bring to to bear. And I think we did an analysis of what we saw as the edge market for telcos about a year back. And one of the things we tried to do is to kind of drive out what are the business drivers for an enterprise or a consumer wanting to use an edge capability from a telco versus building it themselves. And if you look at them, out of 8 of them, 6 of them are all things that are actually telcos are needing to do themselves and can be experts in delivering. Things like disaggregating of systems, better system integration and costs, just reducing down operational costs of running systems. These are all things that telcos can bring expertise to, and in a sense they're actually much more aligned with what the enterprises are needing rather than what the way the public cloud works. So I think it needs not to be seen as it's a black and white answer. The whole of Edge will be about this co-opetition. It will be about partnership. It will be about telcos finding niches where they are clearly delivering real benefit to enterprises in the future. And I think they can do that in a way which is competitive with the public cloud providers.
It's a wide edge, Francis. Plenty of space on the edge for everyone there. Neil.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I think we've built most of the automation solutions actually together through various forums. OpenStack has got to where it was partly because of data center folks, partly because of telco folks. Telemetry and event-based architectures is something that we've collaborated on with the hyperscalers. And I think we all put a lot of that, across the industry into the public domain. I think the question is do you go and build that and integrate it yourself, or do you take it off shelf from one of the hyperscalers or another company? Because there's others that offer this. We've done a bit of both, taking some things that were just obvious, they were good, they were brilliant, we took them. There's other things that we didn't think were good enough, so we've added them to our own telco cloud solution, and really that's I think that's going to be the model that most use. However, I do think I think there's a big timing question on this. I have to admit that if some of the solutions that the hyperscalers have today were around 3 or 4 years ago, I kind of wonder where NFV might have ended up, because our industry struggled with NFV, and the big promise of it really didn't deliver. Now I look at some of the solutions, like Amazon's Elastic Kubernetes service, and I think, crikey, if I had that 4 years ago, my life would be very different in terms of how we're building things. And I think there's some, learning to take away from how we then go about building the next generation of edge services, working with, working and collaborating with both the customer and other solution providers to get the automation right. But what's absolutely clear is, if you're building a new service and it isn't automated, you're probably dead before you've even launched it. Automation is just crucially important, and moving to event-driven, intent-based solutions on that is really what customers are crying out for.
Yes, thank you very much for that, Neil. Moving on to our final question for today. Do telcos have sufficient relationships with application service providers and developers of network-aware applications to maximize their edge investments? This gets back to the partnership question specifically for applications developers and those who are providing and designing services that are going to be running and on the edge networks and sold. Yves?
Yes, very good question. And in fact, being more a network guy, what I discovered recently is that this question, we have more or less the same question basically just on 5G, even without talking about edge services and applications. And this is one of the reasons why we have put some effort, and we think we still need to continue to put some efforts to discuss with the various industries for them to understand what they can do with all these capabilities, because they have a lot of things to work on to understand how they will use it. And this is something coming back earlier, some years ago. We had, in fact, quite of the same about IoT. We came back with some IoT technological solutions, and the answer was yes, nice, fine, but how will we use it? So we'll need to work on that. So we have one of the examples how we do it is that we have established what we call 5G labs, so that companies can test in advance what will come in a few years from now. But there is a learning curve on all of the enterprise companies to understand what they will do with that. That's valid for 5G and for Edge.
Thank you, Yves. Neil, you agreeing with what Yves saying there?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a two-way road. I think we don't know enough about what the application builders are doing, and they don't know enough about what we can give them in the network. You know, we've been recently working on a security project where we can give a whole lot of AI data to an application to ensure that someone who is saying that there's someone, we can actually prove it or actually question it. And I think what was clear is when the companies we were working with, they're like, oh, we didn't know you could do that in the network. So I think that, you know, we've got a big learning curve on all sides of industry. And actually, you know, do manufacturers really understand what service companies do? And I think, you know, if telcos are to become platforms which are effectively connecting people who want something with people who've got something, if we're really to get the benefit of that and use Edge as part of the solution for that model, then we've all really got to get a lot better at understanding the different models. And that's where, you know, if I look at the hyperscalers, I think that's where they've done a tremendous job and something we need to learn from them. But it's amazing how few organizations out there understand what the network is capable of. And you know, we look at all the features we build, most of them we never turn on, and I think that's something we've absolutely got to change.
Oh, thanks very much for that, Neil. Francis.
Yeah, I'd echo Neil's sentiment. I think that is the challenge. The simple answer to your question is no, telcos don't really understand their application service providers and development communities. But there's an underlying opportunity there, and a part of it is actually a change in behavior. We talk about something called Edge, but Edge to an enterprise is actually their network. It's their business, and I think a lot of it is actually us having the mentality, which is to, as Neil says, to start thinking about exposing those capabilities and making it more obvious what we can deliver to them, and putting our feet in their shoes. Really, the other area I think that is a challenge for telco is we typically, I've just come off another call with a major provider, and they're talking about a very interesting EU initiative for 5G and all the rest of it. But there's always this great big chasm between these exciting ideas, these science projects, these proof of concepts, and actually turning that into something that somebody would use. And I think there's an opportunity to look at what the cloud the hyperscalers are doing here, because they don't kind of hide what they want to do in a science project. They very much do try to get it out as a proof of concept, a beta, trial customers, etc. And I think telco could learn by that and actually succeed very well in this area if they can adapt that type of mentality. I'm just taking a very specific example for Edge. If you look at something like AWS Outposts today, that hasn't just happened in the recent history. It has a history going back to what was initially Snowball Edge, the idea of effectively renting a server on Amazon, and even all the way back to a data center extraction solution called Snowball. So they've been evolving this. They've tried it out. They've achieved it, and I think telco needs to be much more cognizant of that. It needs to see, yes, I'm doing this proof of concept, but I'm actually going to take it to that next stage. I'm going to trial it with some customers.
Thank you, Francis. And Francesca, final thoughts from you on the partnerships between telcos and application service providers?
Yes, I think this is an important partnership that we need to develop, especially if we want to position connectivity in a strategic initiative for enterprise like digital transformation. And we are building this relation with the application ecosystem in different way. So we are innovating our go-to-market strategy through SIs in a way that we can leverage on their application marketplace that has been certified with their own IoT platform. We are growing our interconnection capability, and that gives our customer access to a broader digital ecosystem and their marketplace. And then as part of the synergy that we are developing with hyperscaler for enabling distributed cloud, we also give our customer the possibility to access DevOps environment, but also the application ecosystem that the hyperscalers bring along.
Thank you very much, Francesca. Thanks, everyone. We have to draw our discussion to a close now. Thank you all very much for participating and sharing your views and opinions. Now, if you're watching this on day one of our DSP Leaders Summit on Edgeonomics, then don't forget, send us any questions you have on this subject and we'll look to answer them in our live after show program later today. And please take part in our online poll. You'll find it below this video player window next to the Q&A app. All of today's programs are available to view online here at TelecomTV. We'll be back tomorrow with 2 more roundtable discussions for you. Until then, thanks for watching and goodbye.